Good, you? Okay, we're good to go. We'll call the meeting back to order. Get a motion to adopt the agenda. Councillor Reid, all those in favor? Carried, thank you. Previous minutes. Councillor Badeko, motion to approve the minutes. Okay, all those in favor? Carried. They were riveting minutes. Delegations, we have none. Moving into bylaws. Bylaw 24. We just had a public hearing about this. Still fresh.
Perfect.
Heritage Hills Stormpond dedication. Welcome back.
Thank you. So I won't go through my whole presentation again. I'm pretty sure.
Thank you.
Pretty sure you have the gist of it. So this is the same bylaw that we did just here. And at this point, administration would be recommending that council do give second and third reading to bylaw 24, 2019.
Council, a motion? Councillor McFadden?
Move that council gives second reading to bylaw 24, 2019.
Any debate? No? All those in favor of giving second reading? That is carried. Councillor McFadden, do you want to carry on with third?
I'll move that council give third reading to bylaw 24, 2019.
All those in favor of that motion? It's carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bylaw 30, land use amendment, designation in Heritage Hills.
Okay, so this presentation before you now is to present a land use bylaw amendment, bylaw 30, 2019, within the community of Heritage Hills for the consideration of first reading and to establish the public hearing date. So this map is showing the community of Heritage Hills as a whole. You can see Highway 1A along the south, Horse Creek Road to the west, Township Road 262 to the north. And then the subject parcel is outlined in the black box in the north. This approximately 20-acre parcel is located, as I mentioned, in the north central portion of the community. To date, this parcel has been owned by a separate landowner from the surrounding lands and has not moved forward with development and has instead been developed around with the existing phases of Heritage Hills. The development of this parcel would complete a large part of the Heritage Hills community, mainly by connecting the Heritage Boulevard Road through, as well as allowing servicing and pathway connections to be established between the two sides of the community as well. The slide is showing the existing land uses approved in Heritage Hills. The land use amendment was approved in 2016, shortly following the adoption of the area structure plan and the approval of the Stage 2 neighborhood plan. So on the subject parcel, located here, you will see that the approved land uses do consist of RM, or high density multi-unit dwelling, shown in the brown at the north end, and R2, single and two dwelling district, for the remainder, shown in the yellow. And then as well, some public service shown on the west and south boundaries of the parcel. It's a little bit hard to see on this map, but right along here in the green. So I apologize, this is not going to be easy to read, but I can tell you what it says. So this map is taken directly from the 2016 neighborhood plan. It focuses on the key elements in that neighborhood plan. And it does identify that northern RM parcel that I talked about here, leads down to this bullet here, which says it was intended as a medium density townhouse site that is strategically located near the Central Park and off of a collector roadway. So the site was zoned as RM at that time, to develop a condo-style townhouse development, and it would fall under the dwellings group unit or use in the RM district. So that is why it was zoned that way to begin with. So this map is showing the proposed land use amendment. The majority of the parcels proposed to remain as was intended under the existing land uses. So everything not colored, everything left in white, would stay as the existing R2 zoning to provide the mix of single and semi-detached homes. The largest area of change, although not entirely significant in scale, is the proposed change in the northern portion of the parcel. So rather than develop the condo-style townhouse site that was originally proposed, the applicant would prefer to develop fee-simple, street-oriented townhomes. So although the housing style is not proposed to change, as I'd mentioned, condo townhomes fall under the dwellings group use, which is in the RM zoning, and street-oriented townhomes are a use listed in the R3 district. So this requiring the land use change. In addition, there are minor changes being proposed to the west and south portions of the parcel in order to clean up some property lines and lotting of the future development. Back in 2018, this parcel and the adjacent parcels to the east and west were part of a land swap subdivision that changed the east and west edges of this property to allow this and the adjacent landowner to complete their blocks of development within their parcels. So specifically, this little piece here was originally part of this parcel, but it did get transferred over to this landowner here to complete his lotting. And in contrast, this property line used to be a straight line down, where these bits of the property got transferred into this developer's ownership to mean that these lots could be developed under one single landowner. So this portion of the neighborhood plan amendment that you see here, the strip along the west and the south, were just done as a means to clean up that lotting that was going to change when this parcel went to the adjacent landowner. So this portion here in the yellow is proposed to change from public service to R2 to let that lot happen. And then some additional public services being added on the south here. So despite these changes, the parcel is still dedicating its 10% of municipal reserve under that public service zoning and is allowing for the provision of parks and pathways as per the approved neighborhood plan. So with that, administration is recommending the council do give first reading to Bylaw 30, 2019, and also the council establishes a public hearing date for the bylaw for Monday, October 28th at 6 p.m.
Okay, thank you. First reading, anyone? Councillor McFadden, or sorry, Badeko?
I'll move that council gives first reading to Bylaw 30, 2019 and establishes a public hearing date for Monday, October 28th at 6 p.m.
All those in favor of that? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you on the 28th. Moving on to community survey. The 2019 community survey results.
Is that this one? No. Is that it? Ah, okay. Thank you. Okay. Well, good evening, Mayor Janine, members of council, senior administration. I'm pleased to bring you the results of the 2019 community survey. We are delighted with the satisfaction results, and we are not surprised by the top issues revealed in the survey. I'll give a couple of highlights, and then our consultant will give you the results in more depth. Nearly all the residents surveyed, 98%, are satisfied with the quality of life in Cochrane. We're really pleased to see that. And the biggest issue here is traffic. Other top results, you can see them in your council report. 99% agree that living in Cochrane enables a healthy and active lifestyle. 98% agree Cochrane is safe and secure. 97% agree that Cochrane's a great community to raise a family. 96% are satisfied with local pathways, And an average of 97% are satisfied with support services from FCSS, Parent Link Center, and for our seniors. All of these results can help us as we move forward on Council's priorities and engaging with the community. The data was gathered June 3rd to 18th from people we reached via cell phone and landline. The total number of people surveyed was 401, and the margin of error is plus or minus 4.9%, 19 times out of 20, which is fun to say, but our consultant can explain that more if you have questions. So I'd like to introduce Edwin Shepherd, PhD, Associate Vice President of Energy Research, to give you the details.
Thank you, welcome.
Thank you for having me. This is actually my last presentation as NRG. We've recently been bought by Leger, so now we're Leger Research Group. So this is my going out party for NRG Research Group. So thank you for having me. I'm going to walk through the presentation. It's a lot to digest, so if there are any questions, we can kind of do it right at the end, and you can reach out to me later on if things kind of settle in as we go. So fairly text heavy in this part, but I'll just focus on the main parts, which Lori already addressed. So the survey was run throughout June. We did use a combination of land and cell phone sample. Cell phones primarily to get the younger audience because they don't generally have landlines anymore. So we tend to do a mixture of that just to get the younger audience. We do weight the data, that way it is representative of the population. And that's the bigger issue here, is that we have a representative population or a sample. So we do weight it based on the recent census data. That way there's no skews or biases based on our sample results. As Lori said, the plus or minus 4.9% margin of error, that basically responds to the validity and reliability of the results. So the closer this is to zero, the more perfect you have in terms of reliability and validity. This is generally pretty standard when it comes to survey research to have that plus or minus 4.9%. The main thing to focus on, though, is that representative nature. We did have 401 people surveyed throughout. There is a population breakdown at the very end, which we'll get to. The main thing to focus on is the comparison to the 2014 results of this survey. So in 2014, the survey was conducted in a 4-point scale. So basically you have strongly disagree, disagree, agree, and strongly agree. So there's no neutral point on that, so it's not a balanced scale. The challenge with that is that you tend to force people who actually are neutral in their opinion to go either to the negative or positive side. Generally, people will go to the positive side. So you kind of overinflate those results in terms of that perspective. In this year's survey, we did a 5-point scale. So we did give them that 3 out of 5, that neutral position. For comparison purposes, we included 3, 4, 5 to compare to the 3, 4 from the previous survey. That way it gives you a fairly accurate comparison to those. Throughout the report as well, in parentheses, we have that comparison in terms of the shift upwards or downwards compared to the 2014 results. In terms of the analytic approach, these are the 4 primary analyses that we used. I'll introduce them when I actually get to that analysis, and I'll try and make it as simple to understand as possible because they are fairly complex. So right off the bat is the executive summary. So Lori really addressed a lot of these already. In terms of the top ranked questions through the entire survey, living in Cochrane enabling a healthy and active lifestyle was at number 1, with 99% of people agreeing with this statement. That 99% refers to that top box score. So people who said 3, 4, or 5 on the 5-point scale. So any percentages throughout this, that is what that is referring to, are people who said 3, 4, or 5 out of 5 for their agreement scale. 98% of people think it's a good place in terms of the quality of life presented in Cochrane. And then 98% of people also believe that Cochrane is a safe and secure town. For opportunities to really kind of move forward with, if you're to focus on actionable outcomes, land use and neighborhood planning currently has the greatest room for improvement. It's decreased in terms of satisfaction 34% since 2014. So there is definitely growing concern with the growth and the speed of which that land use is being developed. As Lori also said, that 59% of people also refer to traffic congestion as being a very important issue. This has also increased substantially since 2014. And 43% of residents mentioned that controlling and managing the growth is an important local issue. So this is definitely top of mind for residents. And as was alluded to, those are really the 2 primary concerns residents have as we go through this, is the development of land as well as the traffic congestion within the town. For the strengths, the pathways are a very large draw for resident satisfaction overall, with 96% of people being satisfied with the pathways around the town. 91% are satisfied with the snow and ice control on the arterial and collector roads. And we'll see that road maintenance actually has improved quite a bit since 2014, and it is a very important driver for resident satisfaction. And Cochrane residents are satisfied with the support services provided by the town. In terms of highest importance, these are things that really drive people's satisfaction with the town. Good pathways, the snow and ice control, as well as land use and neighborhood planning play a huge role in terms of importance in the minds of residents. So for issues, we asked residents to basically indicate the most important local issue facing the town today. So you can see the number one issue being traffic congestion, and this is also an 18% increase since 2014, which given the growth of the town in those 5 years, this is likely not incredibly surprising, but traffic and traffic congestion is the number one issue on the minds of residents today. The second one coming in at the managing the growth of town / better planning. This is a 25% increase since 2014. The roads and infrastructure and highways is also an important issue, but it's also gone down since 2014. So it has shown improvements over that 5-year span, and it is still perceived as the third largest issue, but it is improving. The one thing to note is that traffic is a bigger issue for people who have lived in Cochrane for 5 years or more. So residents who have been here from 1 to 5 years don't see it as big of an issue as those who have lived here likely through the rise in traffic and the rise in congestion. So it's definitely an issue across all segments, but those who have been here for longer than 5 years do see it as a much larger issue than other ones. And then throughout the board, it's a fairly kind of consistent percentage of issues throughout. So I won't touch on all of those different elements. You can see those in the full deck, just for the sake of time. But 5% of people, it's a decrease of 22%, say that there are no issues at all. So that's a pretty significant change since 2014 in terms of that perspective. For quality of life, compared to 2014, quality of life has barely changed whatsoever. So it's 98% of individuals are satisfied with the quality of life provided by the town. It was 99% in 2014. The larger shift, though, is when you look at the people who provided the overall top box score. So in 2014, that would be those who said 4 out of 4, and this year, those who said 5 out of 4. So that has actually gone down in 19% since 2014. So the percentage of people who think that it provides a very good quality of life has declined. And we do kind of see that being tied to the challenges around traffic congestion and the growth and development of the land. So that is partially an explanation for that. Aside from that, though, it's still an incredibly high overall satisfaction with the quality of life provided by the town. In terms of perceived change, about 56% of people believe that it has not changed at all in the past 5 years in terms of their overall quality of life. 24% think that it has worsened, and 20% think that it has improved. So what we did here was we actually asked them, why has your quality of life improved, or why has your quality of life worsened, so that we actually get some more insights around that. In terms of the reasons for the improved quality of life, more amenities is the number one driver that people responded to in terms of why their quality of life has gone up, at 52% of people saying that. More recreational opportunities and social opportunities at 28%. And then liking the town, the small town feel, the quieter aspect is at 16%. We do some work in the development and community building sector as well. One of our clients was actually presenting earlier today. And in that we find that a market survey we did basically asked why you would pick the town of Cochrane over other areas close to here. So Calgary, Okotoks, Airdrie, and those different areas. And one of the main drivers was the feel of the town itself. So that quiet, small town, more homely feel. So that is a large driver for why individuals are moving here. And based on reasons for improved quality of life, it is delivering on that in terms of that actual feel. For reasons for worsened quality of life, 68% of people said it's the traffic congestion that's driving their perceptions of worsened quality of life. And number two challenge being that the town is unable to handle the growth or the overcrowding and overpopulation. So there are definitely some concerns around that area. And again, as it says in the sidebar there, it is those individuals who have lived here for longer that are more likely to say that the traffic congestion is the bigger issue that they're facing today for their negative quality of life. This is a relatively new section that wasn't included in the 2014 results. We provided a bunch of statements basically assessing how they feel about the town overall. So enabling an active and healthy lifestyle, feel safe and secure, a good place to raise a family. And you can see really across the board, Cochrane is delivering incredibly well on all these different elements. The main challenge there is I feel connected to the community, with 88% of residents saying they feel connected to the town. One thing we're starting to see is that quality of life is largely influenced by your sense of belonging, so the extent to which you feel connected to your environment and your community. And the more in which residents can feel engaged and connected, the greater opportunity they have to have an enhanced quality of life. So finding outlets, whether it be recreational activities or community events that can really foster engagement and collaboration will help improve upon this feeling connected, which therefore will also impact residents' quality of life overall. In terms of some more specific elements there, it's the younger audiences that are less likely to feel connected to the community. So the 18 to 34 group has lower levels of satisfaction with that feeling of connection. They're also a little more optimistic about the health of Cochrane's local economy as well. So they don't feel very connected, but they do feel that it has an opportunity for a very healthy and local, vibrant economy. Older residents, they're more likely to agree that they have good access to all the daily activities. This generally skews to kind of the older retiree age as well. The younger audience doesn't feel as though they have access to the amenities that they desire, as well as their work and those different elements. We also ask individuals to use one word to best describe the town. And you can see here across this, the larger the word is, the more frequently it was said. The smaller the word, the less frequently it was said. It's a incredibly positive picture painted by the sample that we had. The primary challenges were around traffic, congestion, and being disorganized. So again, even when it comes to that one word element, those challenges do emerge, but when you look at the other aspects, being community, quiet, country friendly, beautiful, great, a home, that's an incredibly positive way to be described by your residents, and they definitely think very proudly of the town. So for growth and development, 68% of people think that it's possible for the town to grow while still maintaining the quality of life they have come to appreciate. So this has actually gone down by 5% since 2014. So there is a bit of a concern that the continued growth of the town will have an impact on their quality of life that they come to appreciate and come to enjoy. And again, this is more so in the residents who have been here for a little bit longer. They're less confident in the town's ability to grow while still providing them that positive quality of life that they've come to enjoy, and that being residents who have been here for 6 years or longer. They provide a top box score of, or a bottom two score, sorry, of 35%. So their confidence is a bit lower on that side of things. But at the same time, the town is still very positive in terms of being informed of the new developments that are occurring. So the residents do feel that they had the information needed to understand what's going on, and that's at 83% satisfaction. So despite the fact that they're worried that the development will impact the quality of life, they do feel as though they're informed about what is going on. So it really comes down to that balance between developing and managing the growth while still providing that quality of life that your residents really desire. For the program service and delivery, right now we have 94% of residents are satisfied with the level of quality of the town's services provided, and that's a 1% increase since 2014. So overall, residents are incredibly satisfied with the level and quality of services offered. This one has essentially a list of all the different services and programs offered within the town, and this is people's satisfaction with those. So fairly consistent across the top. The main improvements being tied to the pathways has gone up 15% since 2014 in terms of satisfaction with pathways, as well as the eco-center drop-off services. They have also increased in satisfaction by 15% since 2014. So those two areas represent the largest growth. In terms of the decrease, it's the bottom two there. So land use and neighborhood planning has gone down 34% since 2014 for satisfaction. So it's currently sitting at 64% satisfaction, as well as affordable housing offered by the town has gone down by 21%, that being at 72%. The one thing we do see is that when it comes to perceptions of affordability and value for money for home purchases, it is heavily impacted by the economy and the government. So we do see in a lot of our other research with developers that perceptions of value for homes has gone down quite a bit this year, and that will likely shift depending on the next few weeks in reality, depending on the economy and the government and those different changes. So there is a negative kind of shift there, so it is something to consider, but there are other factors at play that do have a pretty big impact on those two areas there. So this is the first analysis we really dove into, is the key driver analysis. So generally in community satisfaction surveys, what they'll do is provide everyone with this list and say, how satisfied are you with all of these? And then they'll ask, how important are these to you? Now the challenge is that most times in municipal surveys, everyone thinks that all of these things are important. So you get very little variation in scores because it's hard to differentiate between what's more or less important. So you tend to get 90% of people saying everything's important, which doesn't really provide you with anything to action on. So what we do is called a key driver analysis. So what this is actually looks at how important these elements are in comparison to the other elements in this list. So it's not explicitly saying how important are these to you. It's taking people's satisfaction scores and running an analysis that determines their relative importance. Relative importance meaning how important are pathways in comparison to all of the other things on that list. So actually what it does is gives you the key drivers of overall resident satisfaction. So we put all those in there, and we try and best predict people's satisfaction with the town and their quality of life. So you can see the number one driver of quality of life is the pathways, predicting 20% of that outcome. So pathways are a huge influencer to resident quality of life. Then the second one being the snow and ice removal on the arterial and collector roads being at 16%. And then as you work down the list, the importance of the impact they'll have on quality of life or satisfaction becomes a little less. So it's not saying that you should neglect any of those features. When you think diverting resources and paying attention to certain areas, the higher they are on this list, the bigger impact it will have on residents' quality of life and their overall satisfaction. So we actually plot this on a table here that gives you the performance importance analysis. So on the left there on the axis, you have the importance scores. On the bottom, you have the performance scores, and it creates 4 quadrants. The 4 quadrants being areas that you want to maintain your focus on. So these are things that are very important to residents and that they're also very satisfied with. So these are the things that you're currently doing very well. Then you move into the medium priority. This is the low importance and low performance. So these are things that aren't overly important to residents and they're not overly satisfied with them. So these are areas that you may consider diverting attention to or resources into the high priority area that require more immediate action. The low priority, these are areas that are low importance to residents, but are actually performing very well. So you're doing quite well on them, they're just not important to the residents. This is an area that you can kind of maintain and maybe divert resources from there to other areas as well. The red area being the one you really want to focus on, and that's the priority area. These are things that are high importance to residents, but that currently have a low to medium performance. Now, in terms of that, you can see that land use, the affordable housing, and the bylaws and the arts and culture are 4 areas in that high priority area. In 2014, those ones are more medium priority, but now they've shifted into the high priority area. And by those ones, I'm referring to the affordable housing and the land use. So based on the similar analysis in 2014, they were a little bit kind of more in that medium range, but now since then they have shifted into a high priority area. So when you think of paying attention to that kind of development, that would be an area where you might want to, that's an act-on area there. The snow and ice control has actually shifted. Before it was in a high priority area, and now it's in a maintain area. So in the past 5 years, that has improved substantially in terms of the minds of residents. So that's a very large improvement. And then you can see in terms of the road maintenance, the public engagement, and the parent link center, those are 3 areas there in which they're the medium priority. So they can be focused on, but not at the expense of the high priority area. When it comes to taxation and user fees, perceptions about the value for tax dollars have gone down since 2014. So in 2014, residents believed they had good value, at 72% of residents saying that. This year, it was only at 51% of residents. So there has been a little bit of a decline there. Now, in light of that, the perceived value of user fees has gone up significantly across all areas. So the water treatment has increased by 10%, waste and recycling increased by 7%, the wastewater fee, is 7% increase, and then the eco-center fee is also increased by 15%. So despite the fact that residents have a lower perception of the value of their tax dollar, they have an increased perception of the value of the user fees that they are paying. So this is especially true for the eco-center fee, which has increased by 15% in the past 5 years. For the contact with the actual town of Cochrane, so in the past 5 years, or sorry, past 12 months, 45% of residents have indicated they have contacted the town. Again, this is more likely to occur in a bit of the kind of 35 to 54 year range. 18 to 34s are more likely to not have contacted the town. They generally don't engage in that form of communication, but these results are fairly comparable to the 2014 results. Most individuals are reaching out to the employees, a few with council, and a few with council and the employees. But across that, 54% of people have no contact with the town in the last 12 months. The type of resident contact initiated is the in-person is 52%, an increase in 20% since 2014. By phoning the town directly has decreased since 2014 by 10%. Now the larger shift is kind of those next three boxes. There's a larger shift towards that more social side of things, so the email and the social media. So combined across that, there's roughly about a 35% increase since 2014 in the usage of those elements, so via email, the town website, and social media. So it's definitely important to provide opportunities on those platforms for residents to engage, as this seems to be an increasing trend that we see in the town. The area last contacted, planning the development, is the number one at 18%, town council, mayor, or council member 16%, and waste and recycling at 13%. And then it decreases quite a bit from there in terms of the last area contacted. Of those who have reached the town, 89% provide a satisfaction rating. So those who are actually contacting the town are very satisfied with the interaction they've had. And the reasons behind this is an open-ended question, so we just simply asked, why did you provide that response? Number one being that they were knowledgeable, helpful, and able to help me, good customer service, satisfied with the service, they were friendly, pleasant, courteous, they were quick, efficient, professional. These are all definitely very positive ways to be viewed in terms of the reason behind that satisfaction with the contact. From a more quantified perspective, this is a closed-ended question now. So number one being that town staff are knowledgeable, so people who are reaching out to the town are very satisfied with the information they have obtained. The biggest improvements being the quality of the town service is consistently high, has gone up 9% since 2014. The town practices open and accessible government has increased 10% since 2014. And the town is quick to respond to any concerns has increased by 13% since 2014. So those are definitely three areas that have improved significantly, and that do have a very big impact on resident satisfaction when it comes to communication with the town overall. For communications and the website, in terms of the extent of the information received, the majority of people think that it's just the right amount of information obtained, so about 3/4 of residents think that's the right amount, so that's very positive. The main source of information is the newspaper. So when it comes to this, there's a bit of a participant, I guess, bias here when it comes to this kind of element. They may read the paper and read an article about the town and perceive that as being an interaction with the council and the town itself. So it's definitely maybe a bit of an overshoot here in terms of that percentage, but it is decreasing significantly. Social media is increasing significantly since 2014. So people are looking to other areas when it comes to obtaining information. The social media rise is also highly prevalent in the 18 to 34 audience. So they're the ones who are more likely to look to Facebook or Twitter or Instagram for their news sources, whereas the audience 34 and above are more likely to still refer to newspaper articles or websites. Visit the town website. 3/4 of people have visited the town website in the past 12 months. The majority of the residents visiting the site are between 35 and 54, as I just said. But across the board, they're very satisfied with the information obtained, as well as the ease of use for the website itself. So there definitely is a positive result here. Generally, the 55+ audience they report more difficulties finding things on the internet and ease of use of the website. So there are opportunities there to work on the navigation and information flow with that age group, but for the most part, people are very satisfied with what they're receiving. For public engagement, the majority of individuals do none of the above when it comes to the various platforms of public engagement, with 52% of people not providing any of the above. 1/4 of residents provide input to the town of Cochrane online. 20% provided directly to a member of council. Only 9% have attended a Let's Talk Cochrane public engagement event. 7% attend a council meeting. 7% attend a social event, and 3% have taken part in other activities. So the primary form of public engagement is through the Town of Cochrane online, followed by providing it directly to a member of council. For the engagement with residents, the top three paint a very positive picture. So 89% of residents are satisfied with their opportunity to voice their opinions on decisions that affect them. So they are given that ability to voice their concerns. 88% are satisfied with the opportunities in terms of being accessible and inclusive. And 84% of residents believe that the town takes into account their feedback to make decisions. So these are all definitely three very positive things in terms of public engagement and the residents feeling as though they have a chance to be heard and that their voice actually will have an impact on the decisions made. So this is quite positive. When it comes to the Let's Talk Cochrane, there's a bit of a lower usage of these elements here. So people, only 54% are familiar with Let's Talk Cochrane, so there's a bit of a lack of awareness pertaining to that. And only 25% have contributed to it overall, with only 60% thinking that it's a worthwhile platform to contribute to. So there's definitely a lack of awareness that's largely developing, or that's largely driving, the belief that it's not worthwhile to contribute to. If residents aren't aware of it, then they don't know the value of that platform. So there's definitely an opportunity to engage with residents to really promote and improve upon that engagement aspect. But the top three are definitely providing a very strong image of the engagement. The next thing we did wasn't included in the 2014 results. This is a segmentation analysis. So essentially what we did was take a group of questions to create like-minded individuals and group them into segments and kind of give them personas. So this is more of a marketer's dream because it allows them to figure out how to communicate with residents and build those communication platforms to correctly engage and hit on those individuals. So what we found was actually 4 resident segments emerged from this this particular study. 26% of residents fall in the highly content, and I'll break these out in each segment here in just a second. There are 34% of residents who are very satisfied, but they do have challenges with the planning and growth aspect. They're concerned with that. There are 25% of residents who are satisfied but don't feel connected. So these are those individuals that don't feel connected to their community and have a bit of a harder time becoming engaged with the town. And then there are 15% of residents who are in the highly disgruntled group. So each one's going to have the exact same pie charts here. I won't read out the entire element there, but when it comes to the highly content group, these are essentially individuals who love absolutely everything about the town of Cochrane, and they are your town ambassadors. They will say the most positive elements about the town, and they will support you in virtually anything that you do. So you can see 98% of these individuals have a high quality of life. They're satisfied with the town's services. They're proud to live in Cochrane at 98%, and 99% are likely to recommend Cochrane as a place to live to others. Now this group is made up of 60% of people who are unemployed. This is largely due to the fact that they are in the older segment, so they likely have retired. 73% no longer have children under the age of 18, and 85% do more of their recreational spending within Cochrane. So these individuals who are spending within the local economy and keeping their dollars in the town itself. So these are the very proud ambassadors of the town. We did ask them in terms of their change of quality of life. So only 14% of individuals in this group feel it's worsened in the past few years. The main reasons being traffic congestion and challenges around handling growth. Reasons for improved quality of life: more recreational and social opportunities, more amenities, and they like the services the town provides. So this is definitely the group that you really want to try and transition everyone into because they love everything about the town and they keep their dollars in Cochrane largely. The second group, these individuals provide fairly comparable scores to the highly content group. They do just have some concerns or some stronger concerns around the planning and growth of the town. So these individuals largely have children at home, so 45% have 3 or more people living in their home, and 58% are currently employed. So this is largely that kind of 40 to mid-50s age group with a young family at home. Still very high levels of quality of life. They're a little less satisfied with the quality of the town's services. They're still very proud to live here, and they're very likely to recommend Cochrane. In terms of the reasons for their worsened quality of life, again, traffic congestion being number 1, and the inability to handle growth being the second driver for their worsened quality of life. But for improved quality of life, it's the same outcomes: more amenities, they like the services, and they appreciate the recreational and social opportunities afforded to them. The don't feel connected group, these provide the third highest score in all the questions asked. This is a group that tends to have challenges connecting with the town. They tend to skew to a, kind of the middle-aged group, so that's, I'd say, 30 to 45 age range and a little bit younger as well. But they do have a problem developing a sense of belonging, essentially. So these may be newer residents or people who haven't really had a chance to fully immerse themselves in the community, but they do not feel connected when it comes to their sense of belonging, essentially. They have a lower satisfaction for town services compared to the other two groups, but for quality of life, proud to live here, and likelihood to recommend, they're also quite high there. You do start to see that there are fewer reasons for improved quality of life and more reasons for a worsened quality of life within these groups, the next two. So again, traffic congestion, the inability to handle growth, and now the lack of services or amenities starts to emerge when it comes to this. So this is a group that will generally spend their money outside of the town because they don't feel the services and amenities are quite what they're looking for, so they will kind of shift outwards for that. The highly disgruntled group, you can see that they do have a much lower quality of life compared to the other groups. They're less satisfied with the services, they're less proud to live here, and they're less likely to recommend Cochrane. And this is only 15% of the sample, so it's definitely a much smaller group. For this here, most don't have children living under the age of 18. It's mostly two couple or a two-person household, and about a fifth of them do most of their spending on essentials outside of the town, and 38% do their recreational spending outside of the town as well. So these are people who might not spend as much time here and might not be able to understand what the town can truly provide them with when it comes to the amenities, the services, and the recreational opportunities. So this is definitely a group when it comes to engaging and communicating to, might be more so informing them of what the town offers and can provide them with the amenities in the town itself, as well as promoting those things that are the large key drivers like the pathways and those different elements. Now, the other element we did was we created a comparison to other Canadian cities. So the challenge with this is that if you look across Canada, city satisfaction surveys are done by a bunch of different companies. They haven't all picked us yet. But the challenge is that they use different methods. And when you have different methods, it creates a challenge to compare across all the cities in Canada. So even within this survey itself, you can see the previous survey provider used a 4-point scale, we use a 5-point scale to give that balanced approach. So some companies use 11-point scales, 7-point scales, 3-point scales, 4-point scales. So it creates a difficulty when you try to compare your results to other towns and cities across Canada. So what we did was compared you in 3 different ways to try and best give you as clear of a picture as possible. The first method is we would compare the top 2 or top 3 scores. So that being, if it's a 4-point scale, we would take the 3-4 rating. If it's a 5-point scale, we would take the 3-4-5 rating. Kind of what we did in this particular result here, that we can compare you there. The drawback, though, is that it produces very little variability across cities. I believe in this one you're tied for maybe 4th or 5th, that we'll see in a second, but you're tied with about 40 other cities because there's no variability when you use that big of a range of top box scores. Method 2, this is when we only use studies that provide a balanced scale. So only studies that reported satisfaction on a 5, 7, 9, 11, a balanced scale that way. This is a more accurate comparison to the other cities. The third one is we only use the absolute top box score. So this does provide a lower perception when it comes to the numbers that are shown of overall quality of life, but it is showing only those people who very, very strongly agree. So just that very top box, so 5 out of 5, 10 out of 10, 4 out of 4, whatever that is on that scale, we present it that way. So this is definitely a strong way of creating that comparison. So when we use that first approach of just the top 2 or top 3, you're tied for second at 98% quality of life. So that's what we saw in the results here. If we use the balanced scales only, so the 3, the 5, the 7-point scales that have that neutral point, you're actually the first town or city in terms of quality of life across Canada. When it comes to only taking the absolute top box score, you rank 11th. So 50% of residents provide a 5 out of 5 in Cochrane. So this is the people that are the most satisfied possible. So across that, you can see the range of variability depending on the method that we use to create that comparison in terms of the results that are presented. So when you look at the absolute top box scores just in Alberta alone, you're ended up tied for 4th at 50% of residents being satisfied with the quality of life provided by the town. So Canmore, St. Albert, Okotoks, and then Rocky View are the top, the top three there, the tie at first, and then Cochrane following there. And you can see as you move down the list, you start to get the larger cities that start to emerge in terms of overall quality of life. So in terms of what those smaller centers are providing, it is giving them a better quality of life compared to the larger urban centers. When it comes to community satisfaction, again, depending on which method you use, the town does rank different. So top 2 and top 3 box scores, Cochrane is tied for 5th when it comes to satisfaction with the town, and 94% of people being satisfied. When you only use the balanced scale, you're ranked 14th across 25 Canadian cities at 90%. And when you only use the absolute top box score, you are tied for 37th out of 56 Canadian cities. So there's definitely a bit of a shift in terms of community satisfaction compared to the quality of life aspect. So when you look here, satisfaction with town services, Cochrane is in 9th place when it comes to Alberta cities or towns, with Banff being number 1, and then different elements coming in that way too. So, and there definitely are challenges that towns face compared to cities or other centers when it comes to the providing of services and programs that way. So the quality of life element is incredibly high, but there are definitely opportunities to improve when it comes to satisfaction with the town services across Alberta. So that's, there's a summary of key findings slide at the end, but that will just kind of conclude my presentation. So thank you.
All right, thank you. That was a lot of information.
Yeah, I apologize.
And on purpose. So, council, any question? Councillor Nagel.
Thank you very much for your very detailed study and presentation. So I guess my major takeaway from it is people in Cochrane are generally pretty satisfied. I do have some questions though. When you're asking people about issues they're facing and concerned about, was that an open-ended question, or was it wasn't multiple choice or anything like that?
No. So that one, it was open-ended, and following that, we code the responses into those similar categories. So we used the category list that was generated from the 2014 one as a kind of a base point, but it was open-ended.
So I guess I'd like a bit of a comment on, do you have any idea why we didn't see anything about taxes, or generally just not a lot about economic issues whatsoever? Could it possibly have been the way the questions were worded that people thought you were asking only about access to services and stuff? Or did it just never come up that nobody in town is concerned about their taxes?
I can't speak to that part, but it's generally what we find is that people equate tax issues to certain issues within the town. So when it comes to road maintenance, for example, they may perceive that as being a tax issue, but just say road maintenance as the primary issue. If they just say, and this is just an inference made from previous research, if they just say tax issues, then it won't really address their main concerns. So it's likely that the things that did raise are tied to that potentially, but I can't say with certainty. So,
Was there ever at any point any direct questions that were asked the survey respondents that would have asked them about their concerns with financial issues?
in terms of personal financial issues? Or?
No, like, was there anywhere in the survey where somebody's satisfaction with the amount of money they're paying to the town government being addressed?
Only in terms of those, so I'm kind of pull it up on the fly here. When it comes to those specific programs and services was the only reference to value for money that was addressed in the survey. It's a lot of slides. Oh.
And if I can just add, Councillor Nagel, in the top issue agenda, the question, like Mr. Shepherd said, was open-ended. What do you think are the issues your local leaders should address? Taxes were mentioned. They came in at 3%.
Okay, that's very interesting as we head into our budget coming up, that no one, well, not no one, but a very small percentage of people seem concerned with the taxation level in town. That's good news, actually. Yeah.
Exactly, and then there's the user fees and the value for tax dollars question.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilson?
Thank you for the presentation. I was curious versus other communities, when we see traffic congestion and growth concerns being the main two that pop up again and again as the significant problems facing Cochrane today. Versus other communities, do we usually see traffic congestion and growth concerns as the top two? Are we unique in that? That was the only part I was looking for in the community comparisons I didn't see.
Yeah, sorry. I would say that from what we have done in terms of research, you are fairly unique in that that area, primarily the traffic area. So the land use and developments that will vary by town or city depending on how fast they're growing. But the number one driver being that traffic congestion and increased traffic, I would say it's much more dominant here than it is in other communities that we have surveyed.
Out of curiosity then, what sorts of things do you pop up more generally in other communities if that's not the top one?
Yeah, it'll vary. So in some instances, it might be the recreational service provided. So in terms of the family services and things like that. So the more social support side, that might emerge in some communities. It may be actual road maintenance itself. It really depends on the state of the community itself. So there's really no consistent blueprint when it comes to that, unfortunately. So,
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
thank you, no, good question.
Councillor Reid?
Thank you for that. It was, admittedly, that was a little overwhelming, and it'll take some time to kind of digest and prepare proper questions. I'm assuming the survey questions are part of the material that we'll get as a result of this. Perfect. For me, I think Councillor Wilson's right. I mean, there's nothing new here. It just, 2 years into our term, it just reinforces the importance that we have and the legwork that we've been doing as it relates to the issues of traffic and growth. And so while we haven't got all the answers we need yet, I think we're heading in the right direction, and I'm pleased with that. For me, one of the takeaways was the question of engagement. And I guess for me, what I've learned from this, initially is that given the diversity of our community, a multimodal kind of communications or engagement tools is more appropriate than necessarily maybe some of the tools that we seem to be putting most emphasis on. And in particular, having just done some research and out of personal interest about engaging the younger population and those that are feeling disconnected, my sense of it is that feeling of being disconnected is not unique to Cochrane, but I'd like to hear your answer to that, given your background and experience, because generally there seems to be a growing disconnection of young people in relation to all communities. Is that what your findings are?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Excuse me. So my background is actually, I have a PhD in psychology, so I study relationships and behavior, so I know this from my previous life as well. And you're very much right in that the younger audiences tend to be less engaged at a community level. We also do work with a large developer in Calgary that's across North America, looking at different community engagements across basically the 7 states in Alberta. And we find the exact same thing. That sense of belonging, engagement, and connection to community is generally much lower in that 18 to 34 audience. And in large part, that's more so a preference to not become engaged within some of that. So there's definitely a group of individuals that no matter what you do, you won't be able to fully engage that audience. But as you said, the multi-modes, the best opportunity there to provide as many outlets for engagement as possible. That way, because some people will have certain preferences, some people will only look at the newspaper, others will only look at social media. So by having the different platforms available for individuals, that will kind of reach the majority of people. But you're very much right. Yeah.
Thank you. And I had one other comment in that was what I found interesting about just segueing back to the traffic was that those that are more recent residents, that is less than 5 years, don't see the traffic as being as big a problem, although admittedly still a problem, as those that have been here for some time. And I wonder if that has something to do with where they're coming from. So for example, if a member of a recent resident was coming from Calgary, they might see the traffic issue problems or challenges here as being pretty pale in comparison to what they may have experienced in the city. Do you have any idea or comments on that?
Yeah, absolutely. We didn't ask where they came from in terms of the new residents, so we only know they've only been here for 1 to 5 years. But in terms of our research, we do find that when individuals move from larger urban centers to towns or smaller cities, they do tend to perceive traffic as not being as large of an issue as their starting point, essentially. So for myself, for example, I'm from Ontario originally, so Toronto traffic compared to Calgary traffic is it's apples to oranges really in that sense. So, and then going from Calgary to Cochrane, again, you'd probably have that same transition. So it really depends on what your your baseline is for that traffic comparison. So the inference is that it is people coming from centers where there would be potentially more traffic, and that what is experienced here in terms of that congestion is still an issue for them, but they don't perceive it as being as large of an issue as residents who have been here for much longer, who have probably seen that transition and that increased flow.
Great, thank you.
Councillor McFadden?
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the great report, and I really like how it was presented, and I got a lot of value out of it.
Thank you.
Although I think the overall theme, we know well, Cochrane is an amazing place to live,
Yeah.
and we're all frustrated with traffic. So that being said, though, when you're breaking out the two issues that need to be addressed, traffic, and then it was, I think, land use and community plans, is there a sense or that traffic and the land use is the same problem? Because I often sometimes feel that in talking to the residents, that when they're saying we're not managing growth, they would feel that we were managing growth if they didn't have a traffic problem. The measurement for both is the fact that they're stopped at red lights too long. Is that, were you seeing that it was kind of the same answer, the growth management and the traffic was the same answer?